Do we have people joining in? I can't see on my end.
We have 28 people so far.
Awesome. Well, for those of you who have already joined us, we'll get going here in just a few more minutes. We'll probably get started about 2 minutes after 6, just to give everybody a few minutes to join us. And again, for anyone who just joined us, we'll get going here in just a couple minutes to let a few more folks get in. Right. Well, we're going to go ahead and get started here. Good evening, everybody, and welcome to the first webinar in our Birding the Oregon Coast webinar series. Tonight's webinar is titled Birds of Surf and Sand. And my name is Heather. I am the volunteer coordinator for Seven Capes Bird Alliance. We are so thrilled to have the Oregon Birding Association and Kalmiopsis Audubon Society today as our co-sponsors for today's event and our next one as well. I also want to give a shout out to Nissa Parker, our digital media coordinator at Seven Capes. She was instrumental in getting this all put together. So thank you, Nissa. And just to let everybody know, this webinar is going to be recorded for future use on our website. It'll last about 50 minutes once the presentation starts, and then there will be time for a Q&A at the end. So feel free to put any questions as we go along into the chat, and we will try to get through as many of those as possible tonight at the end. A little bit about who we are. Seven Capes Bird Alliance, formerly Lincoln City Audubon Society, has been serving Lincoln and Tillamook counties since 2006. Our core programs are education, community science, and conservation action. We provide monthly birding outings and events. Our conservation focus areas include forest practices, rocky habitats, marine reserves, water quality, and threats to birds and wildlife, all viewed through the lens of climate change. And if you want to learn more about what we do, you can visit our website, sevencapes.org. All right. And I just want to put a little plug in for our next webinar in the series, and that'll be on June 5th with Don Harris of U.S. Fish and Wildlife. So keep an eye out for that. And as with this webinar, registration is free. Before we begin tonight, I would like to acknowledge the land that we are living on here in Lincoln City. Before the period of white settlement, the land and waters we now occupy on the Oregon coast were home to the Tillamook and Alsea peoples. It is right and just to recognize these sovereign Indian nations and to remember the disposition they were forced to endure. Despite these losses, the Tillamook and Alsea people continue to thrive and act collectively as a part of coexisting federations. As we engage with the wildlife and environment that surround us today, we pledge to learn from these nations within the Confederated Tribes of the Siletz, as well as our neighbors, the Confederated Tribes of the Grand Ronde. And we look forward to collaborating with them on our future goals. And now to introduce tonight's speaker, Roy Lowe is a resident of Waldport, Oregon. He is an avid wildlife photographer, and he was employed with the U.S. Fish and Wildlife Service for more than 37 years. At the time of his retirement in 2015, he was the Refuge Manager of the Oregon Coast National Wildlife Refuge Complex. And in retirement, he has worked with the Paulson Institute and World Wildlife Fund in Hong Kong to assist with training coastal wetland managers in the People's Republic of China, and has been monitoring the return of Western Snowy Plovers in Lincoln City following their 39-year absence. So let's give a warm welcome to Roy, and I'll hand it off to you.
Thank you, Heather.
Yeah.
Can you see my screen?
Not yet.
Okay. How about now? Get back out of here, make sure there's nothing else.
Yeah. Yeah, still nothing on my end. There we go.
Okay. Okay, that look good?
Yeah.
Okay, well, thank you for having me, and I appreciate everyone that's logged in online to listen. My talk tonight is going to be more towards beginners or novice birders or people that are new to the area. I'll talk about some of the birds you can see and some of the places that you can visit to see them. The title is Birds of Surf and Sand, but it also could include estuaries, as I'll talk a little bit about a couple of estuaries. So, you know, when you're out birding or looking at wildlife, it's important to have something to view them with. So at a minimum, you should have binoculars to view few birds. And if you have access to a spotting scope, that's even better. So we'll start off here. These are Wimbrel. It's a larger shorebird with a curved bill. They nest as far north as the Arctic coastline, and they winter as far south as South America. And we're getting towards the end of migration season, but I saw a few of these passing by today when I was out on the beach at Bayshore. So I'm going to start up north, and you can see Boiler Bay State Park at the top and Depot Bay Scenic Viewpoint down here. There's actually a trail system runs all along this area here, and then the Depot Bay seawall. So let's start at the top up there. And as you walk out to the point to look for seabirds, it's good to keep an eye on the grass and areas around there where there can be oftentimes shorebirds in the grass or other birds, gulls. When I walked out to the point on Saturday, there were these Wimbrels perched down here that I wasn't expecting to see there. They're resting during the migration. And you can see over on the right here, a black oyster catcher hanging out. And they actually breed around this headland. And several years ago, this one was breeding right next to the fence, which probably wasn't the smartest idea. But you can see the young bird here. It's only a few hours old, and its dad is sitting on the other egg that's in the process of pipping. And I can tell it's the dad because the pupil of the eye is perfectly round. A female would have like a little dibble, and you'll see that a little bit later. But what we're looking for at Boiler Bay, the point is pelagic seabirds that sometimes get close to shore. Now, some of these photos I'm going to show I took from a boat, but you can see these from the headland. It would be much better with a scope, but you can see them with binoculars. This is an ancient murrelet we see along the coastline. This is a good place to look for them during the wintering period. And then our own marbled murrelet. This is during the breeding season. This obviously is a threatened species that nests in old-growth forests. And during the winter time, they look quite a bit different. They're more white and gray, so they change pretty dramatically from season to season. And we see pelagic birds come close to this area. And one of the best times to bird here to look for highly pelagic birds you normally have to see far offshore, is right after the storm front passes and you get a west wind that might be blustery, maybe showers, but that due west wind will push birds in close. And this is a northern fulmar that normally you have to go a little bit farther offshore to see. You might see sooty shearwaters, and this one is actually shearing the water with its right wing. These birds are circling the entire Pacific, and they're at maximum population passing us in September. They're headed south to the southern hemisphere, where they breed in the Australian summertime, and they breed in South America and more so in Australia and New Zealand. But this is another bird, and there's quite a few other species of shearwaters that have been seen from this point by observers. And I might mention that the Oregon Field Ornithologists and Seven Capes sponsors an annual event where they have experts set up scopes and help people look for these species. And this year was on May 3rd, and I assume it'll be a similar time next year. So be looking for that. Okay, here's another species that you might see under these blustery conditions. This is a fork-tailed storm petrel, maybe a little bit bigger than a robin. And if you're really lucky, you might get to see a black-footed albatross. I wouldn't count on it, but they have been seen there before. Typically, you got to go 12 to 20 miles offshore before you even begin to see them. But last year I saw one just off the beach in Newport briefly. So the next site is the Depot Bay viewing point, and it's at the corner of Vista Street and Northwest Alsea. And there's only place for 2 cars to park, but I've never seen more than one other car there. So I think most of the people reach this by the other trails, but this is a dramatic viewpoint here, and off to the right out of the photo is a colony of breeding seabirds, and this is a great place to see them passing by. And there's actually some birds that breed below these people in the rocky crevices, pigeon guillemots. I don't recommend looking over the edge and taking photos like I did. It's a little hazardous, but if you just look down in the water, you can easily see them. You can recognize them by their bright red feet and legs, same color inside their mouth, all kind of blackish bird with white in the wings. And of course, in the wintertime, they look dramatically different where they're more white than they are black. But standing on this point, typically when the northwest wind is blowing, it pushes the birds close to the cliff, and you get really good views of birds like this common murre. It's the most abundant breeding seabird in Oregon. And when the adults have a chick on the colony, they'll be carrying fish back, one fish at a time. So you can see these birds flying by with the little tail waggling and sticking out of the fish or the bird's mouth. And sometimes they're flying below you, which is kind of a unique view as they fly back to the colony with fish. You can also get good views of cormorants. This is a branch cormorant, and you can recognize it has a blue skin in the gular area. It has that cream color feathers, and it has those facial plumes only during the breeding season. Contrast that with pelagic cormorants that you would see flying by. They have red facial skin and around the gular area, and those white flank patches are really distinctive. If they only have them during the breeding season, but if you see those, you know that's a pelagic cormorant as opposed to double-crested or brants. But notice both these cormorants were flying with their neck stretched straight out. And the largest tern and most common tern to see along the coast is the Caspian tern. And sometimes you get eye-level views here with them as they fly north. They're very large birds, very raucous call. You often hear them before you see them. So now the Depot Bay seawall. In the wintertime, say October through March, black oyster catchers will collect here and roost at high tide. They feed in the intertidal rocky areas. So at high tide, they roost. And so sometimes you can walk along the seawall there at high tide, and you can see a group of these right below you. And I took this from the sidewalk looking down, and they could be anywhere along that seawall, but it's pretty fun to see them. And if you look at them up close, that bird on the far right is a young of the year bird. You can see the outer part of the bill is kind of a grayish color. Its iris is kind of a dull yellow. You can't really see an eye ring. Compare that to the bird next to it with the all orange bill, a really bright yellow iris, and a orange eye ring. So it's pretty fun to go through and age these birds. Okay, this is down at Otter Rock, and it's Devil's Punch Bowl State Natural Area. And the major parking area is located right here. There's an overflow parking area here, and this also leads down to a trail to this intertidal area. And there's some great kelp beds and rocky areas in here. Back here, I want to show you this rocky ledge here, and then a rock here. And that rocky ledge hosts a bunch of what we call rock pipers. They're birds that shorebirds only found in the rocky intertidal areas. These are surf birds, and there's some black turnstones mixed in here. Not a very good view of them, but this bird right here is a rock sandpiper, and that's kind of a difficult bird to find in Oregon. They're here, but you got to look through a lot of birds to find them. And these birds roost here, and if you have a scope, it's obviously much easier to identify them, but there may be 1 to 3 rock sandpipers hauled out here. So if that's a bird you really want to see, this is a place you want to check out at high tide, or at least one of the places. And then further down the trail, there's this rocky outcropping where the trail ends, and it could have a variety of birds perched. Here you see brown pelicans, the white birds, the birds with the white heads are adults, and the other ones that are darker are young birds. And if the pelicans aren't there, there's plenty of cormorants to view. And all these places I've mentioned so far are great places to see gray whales as well. This is over by the overflow parking lot, and you can see at low tide there's some nice kelp beds in there and seagrass. And these are male harlequin ducks. Now, harlequin ducks nest along cold, fast-flowing streams in the mountains. So Cascades, Rockies, well inland. And once the female starts incubating the eggs, all the males fly back to the coast, and they molt into a summer plumage, which they almost look like females. And these birds have just returned. This is June, and they're starting to look really not very pretty. They're losing their feathers rapidly and being replaced with their other plumage. And, I went down there in the wintertime to photograph them when they were looking much sharper. And when you're out birding or doing photography, you often run into things that you weren't expecting. And this is that same general location. and two great blue herons were foraging, and apparently one got too close to the other one, and this all-out battle started. And you can see the one below here, it's got this great blue heron by the neck, and it eventually threw it to the ground and stood on it. And it was hammering its bill into its wing, and the other one was poking it with its wings, and it was an all-out battle. And you can see in the background, there's a black oyster catcher that's getting the heck out of Dodge. He doesn't want to be around these guys, but this was quite a battle, and that's what's fun about being out and looking. You never know what you're gonna run into. So this is a small, discreet place just north of Yaquina Head, Northwest 68th Street. And if you drive down the small road, there's a parking area down at the bottom. And this is kind of a specialty area. If you want to see black scoters, this is the place to go. It's almost guaranteed that during the wintering period, basically October through March, you'll see black scoters out here. There'll be plenty of surf scoters, but oftentimes these birds aren't easy to find, but this is a place you can really count on. So if you go down to Yaquina Head now, you can see the main parking area in the visitor center. You can walk from here down to the headland, or you can drive down and park. And then there's also Quarry Cove, where you park up here and you walk down. And I'm going to talk mostly about the outer headland, but I'll also mention a little bit about Quarry Cove. And a lot of the focus is out here around the lighthouse, looking at the rock we call Colony Rock. And all these rocks have seabirds on them, and there's harbor seals hauled out at various places. So it's a really, really fun place to view wildlife. So early in the season, the common murres stage off the rocks. Oftentimes they'll be in huge numbers like this next to the rock, and they don't come ashore, or a few do very briefly, but later as the season goes on, their numbers build up. And there's some incredible numbers of common murres at Yaquina Head. Now, this is when they were at their peak in the 1990s. The numbers have gone down there, but there's still many there. During this period, we estimated there are about 80,000 common murres breeding at this headland, and that's like 3 to 4 times more than breed all of the state of Washington. So we're talking about a lot of birds. And they're nesting on or attempting to nest on every little rock you can find around there. This is a colony shot, and you can see the young murres scattered through the colony. And this is not a normal situation. Typically, the murres would be in tight formation. Each young would have an adult next to it. But there's been a disturbance here that I'll talk about a little bit. But I wanted you to be able to see these young. Now, these young are getting they got about another week to go. At 3 weeks of age, they leave the rock with their dad. Their mom is done caring with them. They leap off the rock and they go to sea with their dad. And they're at sea for another 4 to 6 weeks before this bird will actually fledge and be on its own. And we know from past observations that some of these birds are swimming all the way north with their young to Washington and British Columbia. So pretty arduous journey and pretty tough time at sea. Now, out at Yaquina Head, out there by Colony Rock, there's a couple of spruce trees. And bald eagles are perched in there most days, or maybe just a single bird, there may be 2 or 3 birds. But it's now a great place to see bald eagles up close. And they fly right by the deck, so you get really great views of the eagles as they're flying around there. And I have way too many pictures of eagles, but it's hard to pass up birds when they're close like this to you. And this is a pair that have landed on the rock. And I want you to look at the size of the 2 birds. The bird on the left is much larger, has a bigger head, as opposed to the bird on the right that is slimmer, smaller head. So the bird on the left is a female. She's larger than the male, and you can see the male is quite a bit smaller. And if you look at them long enough, you can only see one bird, and you can kind of tell right away which sex it is just by its size. So as a bald eagle population recovered, we had more and more bald eagles, and they began preying on common murres when they returned to the colony. This is a young eagle, probably, I think that's about a 2 or 3 year old eagle, and it's overflying the colony. And they'll fly down and snatch a murre right off the rock and carry it back to their nest. They'll feed their young murres, or they'll fly at some place and feed themselves. But the act of taking these individual murres is not the problem. bald eagles can't eat enough murres at Uquinta Head to harm the population, but it's the disturbance that they cause. Repeatedly going into the colony to take a bird, it panics the birds, and here you can see dust rising as the birds. This eagle is just flying over, but they are scared and they're beginning to stampede from the rock, and you see this cloud of dust going up. And consequently, when they leave the rock, the gulls rush in and begin eating the eggs. And each murre only has a single egg. And you can see there's a couple of turkey vultures in here. We get crows and ravens out there. And you can see at the very top of the rock and to the left side, there are two juvenile eagles that are just sitting there on the rock. Now, if they weren't there, the murres would come back and start taking over their territory and be able to protect the remaining eggs. But with those eagles there, the murres won't come back. And so all those eggs are going to be taken. And sometimes when the birds are coming back, the last hurrah is for gulls or ravens to fly to the mainland with an egg and finish eating the contents. This also occurs if there are young in the colony, they'll move in and eat the young as well. So it's a natural phenomenon, and it wasn't on anybody's radar screen because the eagle population was decimated so long ago that we really didn't know that they had this high of a top-down effect as an apex predator. Okay, early in the season, you can see pelagic cormorants ripping up vegetation to go build their nest. Again, you see red around the face there, and you can barely see the white flank patch down there, but also note the iridescence on this bird. Here's a better look at that iridescence. They look black from a distance, but when you get them in the right light, they're just really lovely birds. And when John James Audubon made it to the West Coast, he saw this bird and he named it the violet green cormorant, which I think is a much better name than pelagic cormorant. And you can also see branch cormorants gathering vegetation on the headland to build their nests. Branch cormorants will also dive underwater and pull up marine algae and bring that back to build their nest. And again, you can see the plumes, the white plumes on their back and the side of the face. They only have those during the breeding season. And here all these single individual birds are males going through elaborate display trying to attract a female. They'll gather a little vegetation like a start of a nest, and they'll just do their thing trying to attract a female. You can see over in the upper right, there's a pair of birds that'll start initiating a nest there. Again, look at that really bright blue skin on that gular area. That totally fades out in the wintertime. You can barely see it, but you can see that in the wintertime, you can see the cream colored around the base of the throat there. So Uquinta Head is another great place to view seabirds up close, looking out from the deck. And I took this photo from a boat, but it was only 100 yards offshore there. And these are two rhinoceros auklets, and they're going through an elaborate courtship display. And so people on the mainland could easily have seen these birds. And this was August of 23. Cassin's auklet, a very small seabird, was close to shore. I think it was August, and they were about 150 yards off the headland, so they could have been easily seen by people. The claim to fame for breeding season plumage on Cassin's auklet is that little white stripe of feathers above its eye. That's it. But if you look at that eye, you can see it's a white eye. That means that it's an adult. If it was brown, it would be a juvenile bird. Okay, Uquinta Head is a great place to see birds migrating past too. And all you have to do is look at the form of these birds. They're cormorants, and the way I can tell they're double-crested cormorants is you see a kink in their neck at the base of their neck where it connects their body. They fly like that continuously, so you don't have to see their yellow face, which you can barely see in this photo. If you just see that outline with the crook in its neck, you know it's a double-crested cormorant. And these are Aleutian cackling geese migrating past the headland this spring. We can see white-fronted geese, different species of Canada geese. During the spring migration, Pacific black brant fly by. It's a small sea goose, and they normally fly down close to the water as these birds are. you never know what you're going to see. It's really wild out there, especially during spring migration. And the peak is last week of April, first week of May. These are Pacific loons in breeding plumage, and they migrate by in huge numbers. It can be a steady stream of hundreds and hundreds going by at a time. Then there'll be a break, and then more going by, and more. It's really amazing. These we can also see red-throated loons flying by here, and common loons. And shorebirds are a little hard to identify as they whiz by, but if it's pretty tough to see. But all these guys have black bellies, so that we know that they're dunlin. Okay, peregrine falcons used to nest at Yaquina Head. They haven't for several years, and there are none around this year. But we see peregrines flying by, chasing other migratory birds. Peregrines are migratory. This is an adult bird, has a yellow cere and yellow around the eye. This was earlier in the spring. And in the wintertime, there's also birds to view out there, not nearly as many as the summertime or during migration, but this is a juvenile Peale's peregrine falcon. Normally they breed up in British Columbia and Southeast Alaska. This one wintered right on Colony Rock at Yaquina Head, and for 3 months we watched it fly out and capture seabirds and bring back to eat. This is an ancient murrelet that it's about to finish off. It's still alive. We saw it bringing in Cassin's auklets, marble murrelets, red phalaropes. And over at Quarry Cove, on higher tides, I've seen harlequin ducks fly into the interior part of the cove, and there's a big rock there where they haul out. And you can see these birds look a lot better than the ones that were molting. And here you see four adults, and there are parts of 4 females that are shown here. So when they're on this rock, they're really close, and it's a great view. This rock at times also is inhabited by harbor seals, so it's pretty fun to see them up close and watch their antics, as they're mostly laying around. And in 2018, it was really spectacular. There were several gray whales that were feeding literally 8 to 10 feet from the shore, and oftentimes poking their head into small coves and blowing bubbles. And apparently they were feeding on mysid shrimp. I've never seen anything like that. And I spent 2 whole days watching these whales, and it was just spectacular to be so close to them. I don't expect to see that anytime soon, but you never know. Okay, moving down to Yaquina Bay. You'll see Yaquina Bay State Park, which is north of the North Jetty here, and South Beach State Park, located here, and this is the South Jetty. This is a pretty famous birding area. It's called the Gull Puddles right here. Of course, there's the 101 bridge that has lots of cormorants breeding on it. And I'll talk about the nature trail along the Hatfield Marine Science Center. And then I'll mention this area out here is called the LNG plant. This is a big tank it's the terminus of the pipeline for natural gas in the area. So starting with the jetties, you can see the Gull Puddle areas right here. And it's basically just a big dirt area where people pull in their cars and they'll spend the day, or they'll go fishing or whatever. So it's a big area right here. But I wanted to point out these finger jetties. And this is the longest finger jetty right here. It's the easternmost. And then you see there's some other ones. And all of these oftentimes have birds roosting on them. So you want to make sure you check those for roosting birds. This is that first long finger jetty, the eastern one, at high tide. You can see there's all sorts of gulls roosting on it, and cormorants. Times there's ducks, shorebirds, herons. You never know what's going to be there. And this is the Gull Puddle area, and you can see where it gets the puddle part of the name. It ponds a lot of water in these depressions areas. And the other part of the name is there are a lot of gulls that hang out there, particularly during foul weather. You can see a wide variety of gulls. And so it's fun to go through and look at gulls, first to try to figure out what the juvenile gulls are, which seem to stymie me, but you never know what you're going to see there. Up front, we got a Western gull, and right behind it is herring gull. If you're really good, you might find an Iceland gull or a Thayer's gull, glaucous wing gull. Here's a typical pair of Western gulls, and that's one of our primary breeding species along the Oregon coast. You can see it has a dark gray mantle on the back and the wings, black primaries with white wing tips. Now, if you look at these birds, the bird on the left has a smaller neck and head. It's more petite than the bird on the right. So the bird on the left is a female. They're smaller than the males. You can see his head is broader and a thicker neck. And if he was turned parallel to us, you'd see that his body is larger too. And if you look at them enough, you can tell the sex of them without having both of them stand together to compare. It's pretty easy with a little bit of experience. Now, the other bird that breeds in Oregon is the glaucous wing gull. And you can see it's the back and the wings is drastically different. A lighter gray, there's light gray in the tips of the primary feathers. Glaucous wing gulls, their breeding distribution extends down to Oregon, and the Western Canada goose, the Western gull population, their breeding population extends up to Oregon. So we're at the emergence of these two, and there's lots of overlap. And these birds regularly hybridize. So the vast majority of the glaucous wing Western type gulls around, certainly the Lincoln County area and north, are hybrids, and it can be very confusing, but this is a pretty typical pure glaucous wing gull. And in the wintertime, you might find a black-legged kittiwake in that gull flock. These are pretty much pelagic gulls, but in these big storms, some will get blown ashore, and this is a young of the year bird. We also have a few birds that hang around the jetty area, particularly these grassy areas. These are a couple of juvenile first-year Pacific black brant that showed up. Initially, they were very wary, and then as time went on, they realized they were safe, and so you could get really good looks at them here. And each year, we see a few of these. We also see white-fronted geese here. This is an adult. You can see the white feathers around the base of the bill. That's where it gets its name, for white front. And adults also have these black splotches on the belly. The vast majority of the white fronts that we see here are young of the year that drop out of flocks. They can't continue the migration. And at one point this year, I think we had 24 birds here, and only one of them was an adult. So the South Jetty is a great place to view a variety of seabirds and estuarine birds. And oftentimes I just sit in my car and use it as a blind and do photography and observations. And again, this is a pelagic cormorant, big white flank patches, so easy to tell in the breeding season. But I want you to look at that bill. Of course, you can see the red facial skin around the face and the gular area, but take a look at that bill. And now compare it with a Brandt's cormorant. So we have three pelagic cormorants here. And this is a Brandt's cormorant. And notice how much larger it is than the pelagic cormorant. And look at the bill size and shape. It's much stouter on the Brandt's cormorant. And so you can just barely see the blue gular area here, but the size of the bird and that bill will help you separate it from a pelagic cormorant. And you find these birds roosting on the rocks as the tide's going out and they're exposed, and you can get really good looks at them. And this is another traditional roost rock for a variety of birds. And we have all three species of cormorants here. There are lots of pelagic cormorants you see scattered around the rock here, but there are two juvenile birds here, right here. This bird in the middle is a juvenile double-crested cormorant. And if you look, you'll see even this young bird has yellow at the base of the bill and facial skin. That's always present. And when you see yellow, you know you've got a double-crested cormorant. And the bill's quite a bit stouter. Now, this bird down here is actually a first-year Brandt's cormorant. You see there's no blue skin, but it's got some of that cream-colored feathers, and it's got no yellow on the face or red on the face. So we know that even though it doesn't look like what the pictures I showed previously, this is indeed a Brandt's cormorant. So it's fun to get these birds on the rock together and look at them and practice your ID skills. The South Jetty Yaquina Bay is the best location in Oregon to view harlequin ducks, these magnificent sea ducks. And they occur from October to, you can see them to mid-April, maybe a little later, but they start heading inland at that point. And they get really used to people. If you're quiet and move very slow, you can get really close to these birds. And our peak population occurs during spawning of herring. And this year, I think we had a high count of 74, which is a lot of harlequin ducks for Oregon for one location. And if you spend time there, you'll see other other birds. This is a red-breasted merganser. This is a male who's courting a female, and I was watching him, and I saw him start to eye her, and he started going through this elaborate approach to garner her affection, which it didn't seem to work this time, but it was a little early in the season. And this is a common goldeneye. The male is displaying for this female. She's already prone and ready to mate, but he went through this whole elaborate display. He was calling out, raising his head. He'd turn on his side and show her his belly and show her his wings. And it's easy to tell this is a common goldeneye by the round white spot in front of the eye. I'll show you a different species of goldeneye in a minute. And you can see the bill on the female is yellow tipped. It's a black bill with a yellow tip. So a couple of weeks ago, maybe a month ago, I was trying to get photos of a common loon in breeding plumage, which you see here. And I noticed this one bird steaming across the channel, swimming right at the bird I was trying to photograph, and it basically attacked it. And they both dove underwater, and there was a long chase underwater. And eventually when they came up, they were facing each other, and they ran in place without moving with their wings out. And the whole time they were calling at each other. And then they dropped down into kind of a defensive posture. They never did actually touch each other, but this is a typical display you would see inland at a breeding lake where they're defending breeding territory. So I was really, really surprised to see this out here on the coast. But, you know, it's springtime, and I guess the hormones are flowing, and for whatever reason, this they decided to tangle a little bit. And this is a young red-throated loon. Sitting along here, you can actually, if you're lucky, you can see all three loons, maybe probably not in the same day, but you can also see Pacific loons here. And one day I was actually hiding in the jetty rocks as a loon was working its way down. I thought, well, I'll get really close to it. It'll surface right in front of me. And I was sitting there, and this female red-breasted merganser came out of nowhere, surfaced, and got out on this rock and started preening and doing all this really great stuff. So if you get there early in the morning before there are a lot of people and just sit there and watch, birds will be moving by, and you'll never know what you might see there. This is a pretty fun photo. It shows all three species of scoters that you can see in Oregon. There are three surf scoters here. Obviously, this is a white-winged scoter because the white in the wing. And the yellow sear area on this bird is a black scoter. And the best time to try to see all three species in Yaquina Bay is when the herring are spawning, because it's a huge attraction to scoters that want to feed on the eggs. And this is what it looks like after a spawn, and hundreds upon hundreds of scoters. And the vast majority of these, all I can see in this photo are surf scoters, but I think if you look through here long enough, you'd be able to find maybe one or two of the other species. It's really dramatic. And so herring typically spawn in early March. They could be late February, but recently it's been early to mid-March. And it's a great time to be there to watch this and watch the birds that are pursuing the adult fish that are spawning. And this is also a good place to look for long-tailed ducks. They're not real common in Oregon. You have to really hunt to see them. And usually Yaquina Bay has 2 or 3 at least each year. And when the herring are spawning, that's a good time to look for them because they love herring eggs as well. And buffleheads, they look like little black and white ducks, but when you get them in the right sunlight, the black area that looks black on the head has all this beautiful, almost a rainbow iridescence to it. They're really lovely, but you got to be close and you got to have the right sunlight. But the South Jetty is one of those places you can do that. And you might be able to see up to 5 species of grebes in Yaquina Bay. This is a winter plumage eared grebe, and it's got a little buffy butt, a little bit longer bill and thinner bill. And that brown in the head extends down below that kind of yellow eye. Now, the next bird will be a winter plumage horn grebe. And you see that the separation between the white and the black on the head is a straight line. It's got that bright red eye and a shorter, sort of thicker bill. It takes a little bit looking at these to separate these two, but after a while, it's pretty easy. But most of these birds depart inland to breed before we get to see their breeding plumage, but sometimes we're really lucky. Now, this is a winter plumage horn grebe, and this is what they look like in breeding plumage. Just spectacular change. And I always hunt for them every spring, trying to see them in this plumage, and that's not always possible. But if you look long enough, you can perhaps find some. And this is a redneck grebe, and it's just starting to change into breeding colors. And this is what they look like about the time they're ready to depart the coast and head north and inland to breed. And where you have concentrations of birds, you often have bird predators. This is a peregrine falcon, and I arrived at the South Jetty just after it had captured a bufflehead and was beginning to eat it. And it allowed me to stay pretty close in my car photographing it. And, cars a lot of times don't bother, bother birds, but the minute you step out of the car, you become a potential predator to them. At least that's what they perceive, and you scare the birds away. So try to stay in your car at these places and do your observations. You'll be much more successful. These are pelagic cormorants, and they're carrying vegetation, and they're flying up to the 101 bridge over Yaquina Bay to build their nests underneath the bridge out of vegetation. Excuse me. Down below on the pilings and groin areas below the bridge, we have branch cormorants nesting, and they're nesting here. You can see they use a variety of vegetation and grasses to build their nests. On some of these same pilings and underneath the bridge, we have a lot of double-crested cormorants breeding. You can see these crests it has during the breeding season on its head and that bright yellow face. And look at the nest. It's made of sticks. Primarily, the birds breeding along our coast use sticks. So if you see a cormorant in a stick nest, it's going to be a double-crested. Now you can look over the bridge railing down directly down on these birds. It's not such a great view, but if you want to get a closer view, you can go to the northeast side of the bridge, walk down the sidewalk like you're going to walk down to the Coast Guard station, and about halfway down, there's a trail that'll lead you down, and you can go underneath the bridge and get a better look at all these species of cormorants. Over at the Hatfield Marine Science Center Trail, it's great to go over there about 3 hours before high tide, when the tide is beginning to flood the last mud flats, which are along the Marine Science Center Trail. And there'll be large numbers of gulls. And you'd see we got a couple of Caspian terns roosting here with them. And that bird on the right has bands. And we know from the banding that this bird was banded 10 years earlier as a young bird, 10 years before I photographed it. And see lots of California gulls out. This one just having a nice stretch. And you can get a good comparison to various gulls. And the bird on the right is a California gull. The bird on the left is a ringbill gull. And before I took this picture, I didn't realize there was such a dramatic difference in size of these two species. This is also a great place to see shorebirds as all the mud flats flood and the last ones left right along the Marine Science Center Trail. They'll congregate. This was about, I think about 2 weeks ago I took this photo. And just before high tide, these are all Western sandpipers and breeding plumage. They were roosting here. You can see a lot of rustiness, rusty color on their back and the side of their face and the top of their head, black legs, and compare that with the least sandpiper, some rusty feathers on the back and wings, but more brownish on the head. And note that it has kind of this, they look kind of oranges, but they're usually yellowish or greenish legs. If you see a small sandpiper with legs this color, it's a least sandpiper. And this is actually the smallest sandpiper, our smallest shorebird in the world. They weigh less than 1 ounce, and they migrate from as far as the Arctic Ocean to northern South America. Pretty amazing. This is a red knot. Most of the red knots leave Mexico and fly right past Oregon and stop at Grace Harbor or Willapa. But occasionally we see a few along our coastline, so it's always nice to look for them and fun to get to see one. This is a shorebird dowitcher, but what I wanted to show you is the upper bill of shorebirds is flexible, and it's loaded with sensor organs to help it find invertebrates down in the sediment substrate. And you can see what's really great about this is the bird can be probing really deep and just use the tip of its bill as scissors to grab the invertebrate instead of having to open the entire bill against the mud and grab it. So pretty unique. And the same area is a great place to see these brant up close. These black brant, there's only about 100 left that winter at Yaquina Bay, down from about 400 30 years ago. And they roost on the mud flats and they're preening and so forth before the tide comes in. And you see a lot of these have green leg bands, and these bands have alphanumeric codes on them, and they can be identified by individuals. We know all these came from the Arctic Ocean about 70 miles east of Barrow. We often see rare birds. People find rare birds along this area, and this is a Hudsonian godwit that normally migrate down through the central part of the country. This is a ruff. This is a bird that is normally found in Europe and Asia. We had 2 here that day. Last fall, we had a king eider that showed up and spent some time. A lot of people got to see. And you also got to keep an eye on the trail when you're walking along, because there's other land birds to see. This is a tropical kingbird that spent a little time along the trail. And hundreds of people flock to the trail to see this bird. It's a dusky cap flycatcher. I think it's a 2nd record ever for Oregon. They're typically found south of the United States border. Out to LNG plant, it's one of the few places in the county where you can see canvasbacks regularly. They're pretty hard to find in Lincoln County. If you're really lucky, there might be a redhead duck with them. They're pretty hard to find here in Lincoln County as well. And there's plenty of other birds out there. Here you see a Eurasian widgeon, and below and above that is an American widgeon. And this is a pair of Barrow's goldeneye, and it's the easiest way to tell is that crescent white shape in front of the eye instead of a round eye. And it's got a higher peaked head, and the female has an all orange bill. So there's a variety of ways to separate that. So out at the jetties, we South Jetty or North Jetty, we see lots of birds passing by during migration, which is just about over now. These are all Western sandpipers headed north. This is kind of a mixed flock. The bird in the lead is a sanderling. There's 2 semi-palmated plovers below it. There's dunlin in this flock and Western sandpipers. This is mostly Western sandpipers streaming by there, so you can see some black bellies of dunlin moving. And here's some more Western sandpipers going across the jetty. They cut across the jetty. Some will go up the bay, some will go over to the North Jetty, and oftentimes they'll land on the other side over there on the beach. And you might be lucky to see a marble godwit. I've seen these on both those beaches, on many beaches along the coast here, and you see them probing for these nice juicy sandworms. It's a type of polychaeta. It's not very good looking, but I'm sure it's full of a lot of protein. And sanderling is another bird you can see. These birds run in and out with the wave swash. They like to be out in a really wet substrate to capture things to eat. They're in the wintertime, they're grayish and white. And many people will think they're snowy plovers, but there's a dramatic difference. Here you see at the bottom of this photo 4 snowy plovers. And they have a dark back, they have a semi-collar, light-colored legs, as opposed to the pretty white and gray and black-legged sanderlings in the background. And you could potentially see snowy plovers on both of these, both the Yaquina Bay State Park and South Beach State Park. In the wintertime, they're hauled out on the high tide line. And if you walk by quietly, they'll just sit still. And they love human footprints to get down in to kind of hide from predators and get out of the weather. And oftentimes the snowy plover flocks will attract other wintering birds. And the bird in the back is the snowy plover. The one on the right is a winter plumaged Western sandpiper. And the one on the left is a winter plumaged dunlin. And the next photo will show you the dramatic difference in plumage for the dunlin. These are birds that are getting ready to head back to breed up in Alaska and Canada. And we see quite a few whimbrels, and they love to eat mole crabs. And I thought this one was going to peck this thing apart and eat it piece by piece, but it made the decision to swallow it whole. And I think maybe it was kind of sorry after it did. It really had to work to get it down. But a few of these are still going through. I saw some on the beach today. And at South Beach last fall, we had a couple of golden plovers and of each species. And the bird on the right is an American golden plover. And the bird on the left is a Pacific golden plover. And there's a variety of features you can look at to try to separate the 2 species. They don't always look this starkly different in plumage, but the way that nerdy birders really figure this out is to count the number of primaries that extend past the tertiary feathers. These are tertiaries, and here's the primaries. If it has 4 or 5 that are past the tertiaries, it's an American golden plover. If it has only 3 or 2 primaries extending past the tertiaries, it's a Pacific golden plover. So you got to be pretty close to view it this way, but hopefully you'll get to see them in breeding plumage. And the bird at the bottom here is a Pacific golden plover, and the one up above is a black-bellied plover. And this bird appeared on the beach here. This is a mountain plover. This is the only one that I know of since then that has appeared. They're basically migrate down through the center of the country. So you might not get to see one of these, but I'm going to keep your eye out. And on May 1st, these 4 American avocets landed at just south of the South Jetty. This is the first time I got to see an avocet on the coast in 40 years. And these birds were very accommodating. They stayed around all morning into the afternoon for birders and photographers alike to see. And you can separate the sexes by the degree of the recurve in their bill. The bird in the front that has less recurve is a male, and the bird in the background with the more sharply recurved bill is a female. And in the winter plumage, they don't have that rusty color head. Okay, I just wanted to show you a Western sandpiper next to a Dunlin and explain that because of their bill length, these 2 birds can be foraging in the same area and not competing in one another because the dowitchers can go much deeper than the Western sandpiper can. And here you see a group of Western sandpipers in breeding plumage, and they're basically plowing the beach. You can see all this disturbed sand, and it's really amazing to see this. And you can go out after the birds are gone, and you can see the sand plowed and all these little peck holes and know that shorebirds were present. This is another bird to look for in the springtime. Mostly, this is the one with the black head. There's an adult Bonaparte gull. The other gulls are mostly winter plumage, but it turns out they're first-year birds. You can see a brownish color in where their wings are. So these are first-year birds. But it's really nice to see these breeding plumage birds as they're moving north. Because the other area I want to mention is Ona Beach, halfway between Waldport and Newport. And this is a good place, a small location to look for shorebirds. This is a buff-breasted sandpiper, and these are pretty rare here. We only casually see a few in the fall, and I don't think we saw any last year. And these are juvenile birds. They typically fly down through the center of the country, heading to Argentina. But if you're lucky, you'll see one of these birds. They're really magnificent. And this is a pretty common bird in migration some winter here. This is a semi-palmated plover. A little bit larger and obviously different coloration than a snowy plover. And it's a good place to see sandpipers up close. We've got a Western sandpiper in the front here and a kind of duller plumage with the yellow legs of a least sandpiper in the back. And here's another photo of a least sandpiper. You can get pretty close to the birds here, so that's why I'm showing these. And right now we're on the back end of the migration of red-necked phalaropes, and you can still see them going by. These are in breeding plumage. This was at Ona Beach, but it could be at Yaquina Bay or Slets Bay or anywhere else along the coast. And again, I was at Ona Beach when this juvenile peregrine landed and sort of scoped things out and then parted his way and continued on. So now we're down at Seal Rock State Park. You can go into the parking lot there and hike down on the beach, and there's things to look at here. But I want to focus on this area down here at Quail Street. And all these rocks you see out here at a real low tide are on the beach. And there's some great tide pools down here. And so you want to go in the morning when the light's at your back, and you want to go early too, because there'll be more people down here later on with dogs and so forth. So the wildlife might not be as cooperative. But I was down early and I watched this great blue heron. I think it captured something like 7 different fish in a short period of time. And this is a species of gunnel. Black oyster catchers nest nearby, and oftentimes you'll see them flying around and calling. And there's a small stream of water that runs out here, and oftentimes they'll come over and bathe. This is actually a female. If you look at the pupil, you can see it's not perfectly round. It's got a little dibble on the bottom, and it's going through pruning, and so preening. Another good place to see what we call rock pipers, the shorebird species that use the rocky intertidal. This is a black turnstone in breeding plumage. Black turnstone on the right, surfbird on the left. If you're really lucky, you'll see a ruddy turnstone, but ruddy turnstones aren't specific to rocky areas. You're just as likely to find one on the beach or in the day, but really a pretty knockout bird when you see them. We don't get to see a lot of them moving through. I was fortunate one fall to get both species. They're both first-year birds, and they were vying with each other. The one on the left is a black turnstone, and the one on the right is a juvenile ruddy turnstone. These are all at Quail Street. And it's another place to look for rock sandpiper. It's a hard to see bird, small kind of indescript gray bird, yellowish legs. Got this this bill that droops a little bit, oranges at the base. And these are surfbirds, aptly named. They know how to judge the waves. When the wave was coming that was big enough that would knock them over, they would leap in the air and then land again. This one, they judged that they didn't have to move, and so they stayed. But when the wave passed, you can see there's a couple of fights going on over foraging territory. These are birds that are molting and breeding plumage, their hormones are increasing. And there's another bird you might see there, a wandering tattler. You usually see maybe 1 to 2 to 3. They might be in company of these other birds like turnstones and surfbirds. This is breeding plumage, and it's just all this gray barring. In the wintertime, they're mostly just all gray. And when they fly, it's easy to tell who they are because they're just totally indescript. There's nothing dramatic about this bird. It has a very distinct call, but as opposed to surfbirds, when they fly, they flash a lot of white and easily to see. And here's a flock of black turnstones in the rear here, a couple of surfbirds, and you can see some rock sandpipers here. So they show a lot of white when they fly, and a lot of times that's the first time you see them is when you are startled by them. So now I want to move down to Alsea Bay, talk a little bit about Bayshore Spit, Port of Alsea, and Ekman Lake, especially the outlet here. This is Bayshore Spit when there are a lot of gulls moving through the area. It can be hundreds to thousands of birds out there. Again, good place to look for different species. If you're lucky, you'll get to see a Heermann's gull during the summer. They're up this way. They get this white head, gray body, nice red bill. If you're really lucky, you'll get to see a flock of them roosting. And another bird that we occasionally see are glaucous gulls. This is a juvenile glaucous gull, so it's mostly white, pink bill and black tip. I think it's much more beautiful than the adults that have a gray mantle and so forth. So if you look long enough, you'll see one of these along the coast. And I think there was one recently at D River, the wayside there. And in the fall, we look for juvenile birds. This is a Sabine's gull, or Sabines, however you want to pronounce it. First-year bird, very beautiful. And my friend sent me an iPhone photo and said, "Hey, I don't know what this is." And I raced down there. It was really fun to see. So look for this anywhere along the coastline. You're lucky to see them because the adults are highly pelagic and we don't see on the shore. And lower Waldport Bay down by the seawall is a good place to look at pigeon guillemots. And you'll see them capture a variety of fish, and they'll fly back to their burrow or their crack or crevices where their young is. And this bird has a Pacific sand lance, which are really important forage fish. And these are long-bill curlew. It's the longest, it's the biggest shorebird in North America. And we get to see a few of them in the spring and fall migration. For the past 2 years, 2 to 4 birds have wintered at Alsea Bay, which is a bit unusual. These birds were here this year. And the bird in the background, the larger bird with the longer bill, is the female. And this was taken at Bayshore during spring. There are actually 6 species of seabirds here. We have a couple Western sandpipers here, a couple of red knots, dunlin all across here, a black turnstone, couple of black-bellied plovers, and a dunlin hiding back here. So springtime is a great time to be out during a migration. Now this is a fall migration, and this is a Baird sandpiper. The adults migrate through the center of the country, not down the Pacific coastline. So it's not too hard to find these in flocks of shorebirds. I've seen up to 8 in the flock. So there are quite a few juveniles that come this way. And one way they look kind of stretched. Their tail, I mean, their wings extend well beyond their tail, which is one way to separate these from some of the other shorebirds. And in the springtime, when the wind's blowing, these birds are flying right down on the deck. These are literally inches above the beach. These are Western sandpipers. The middle bird is the dunlin, a little bit larger, longer bill. These are black-bellied plovers flying along the beach. The northwest wind keeps the birds close to the shoreline and oftentimes down low. Here you see short-billed dowitchers fighting the northwest wind. And of course, avian predators, we see merlins flying along the coast in migration. This bird you can see has a little bloody belly, so he's been feeding on the bird. And large flocks of shorebirds. It's just really fun to be out when they're moving and they're flying all around you. They'll split and go around you. It just really, just a magnificent sight. Over at the Port of Alsea, if you get there early before people are rooting around, you can see a variety of birds. These are Western grebes. This one was giving me a big yawn. I guess he was bored with me. I've seen pelagic cormorants foraging around the port. Hooded mergansers. This one has a Dungeness crab. It's going to break all the legs off this thing and swallow the body whole. One day I was there and it was February and these males started going into a whole display thing for a female that was just outside their frame. So that was pretty fun. But really, you got to be there early to be able to hope to see the birds, because once people are walking on the docks, the birds kind of move out. And I've seen a lot of scoters there eating mussels off the pilings and under the dock. And a lot of gulls hang out there. This is formerly was called a mew gull. It's now called the short-tailed gull. And then up at the Ekman Lake outlet, this is another place where I stay in my car and photograph. And recently we had some Wilson snipe that were feeding out along the edge of the marsh. And it's really tough to see these birds. Usually they stay hidden. Kildares were coming in and roosting there and preening. This bird was actually feeding. And greater yellowlegs. This is 3 of them lined up. This is right at the outlet of the lake, and they have this more stout bill. But if you notice, it says it's lightly upcurved, just so slightly. When sometimes you look at it, think, is that really upcurved? But it is. This is the lesser yellowlegs. You can see both of them at the site. It has more of a needle-like small straight bill. When you see them together, there's a real size difference. So that's an easy way to tell when they're apart. But again, look at the bill when you see these birds. Also, during the winter plumage, this is pretty just washed out neck area, whereas this has lots of streaking and so forth. So I watch them foraging there all the time. They eat lots of fish, and I've seen them catching shrimp and also catching a lot of these polychaetes. I'm not sure which worm this is, but I see them readily catching those. And sometimes dowitchers are hauled out there. This is a bird in breeding plumage, and it's going through plumage. I mean, for a pruning, and I'm sitting in my car looking down out the window at this bird. Green-winged teal are pretty commonly hauled out here and feeding here. And common mergansers will come in. They're really wary of people and even cars, so you got to be really tricky to see these things. This is a female. This is a male. They'll come in. They'll try to get right at the outlet of the lake and capture a lot of different fish. And ospreys, there's a nest in the lake, and this is carrying a cutthroat trout over to the lake. I think I'm running out of time here, so I'm going to speed up. Ekman Lake has all kinds of waterfowl on it. This is a ring-billed gull. You can see that, ring-billed duck. It actually has a ring around its neck, which is really hard to see. This is the female, pretty dull plumage, but that bright ring around the bill. They really should have called this the ring-billed duck instead of the ring-necked duck. Okay, lastly, you need to take a trip up to Cannon Beach if you want to see tufted puffins. This is Haystack Rock. You want to go early in the morning on a minus tide, because you can get all the way out past these rocks at times out in here. The puffins are nesting in burrows on the slope here, and they fly around the rock. And from the from July through mid of August, they're feeding young and they're flying around circling with billloads of fish and squid to feed their young. And so you can stand on the beach, you got great lighting and see these birds. If it's high tide, you're way back up the beach and it's really tough to see them. There's also a friends group here, the Friends of Haystack Rock, that'll have scopes set up and they'll help you see tufted puffins. And here you can see three on the slope on the rock. This is probably the easiest and best place to see tufted puffins on the west coast of North America. You can drive through, park your car, walk out on the beach, and there they are. You don't have to take a boat trip. You don't have to go to remote areas. Here they are circling around the rock. Just really lovely birds to see. During the wintertime, they're far out to sea, so we don't get to see them at that point. And here's a bird carrying a billload of fish. They can catch a bunch of fish at one time and come back and feed their young quite a few fish, as opposed to like a common murre that's catching a single fish. There's another bird with a billload. We oftentimes see them with squid. And if you're on the beach looking, you'll see common murres flying right over your head, carrying that single fish back to its young. And also pigeon guillemots. This one has some species of flatfish, perhaps a English sole or something like that. We don't really know. But anyway, that's a quick trip around part of the coast. You can expand this to other estuaries in terms of finding some of these waterfowl and grebes. Same with shorebirds. If it's spring migration, the wind's blowing, get on the beach wherever you're at, and especially if the northwest wind is blowing, and you'll get to see these birds traveling along. So that's all I have for my presentation. I'm going to unshare my screen. Okay, am I out? Hello?
Yeah, you are all good.
Okay.
Thank you so much. That was really amazing. Those photos are so beautiful. So we're gonna open it up to some questions now. Looks like we got a couple in the chat. If anyone has any more, feel free to throw them in there for us, but we'll go ahead and get started.
Yeah, so yeah, like Heather said, feel free to shoot your questions if you have any. We've got a couple good ones to start off. So the first question is, what months are breeding season for which birds? And we might expand this to kind of encapsulate what is the best time of year to see maybe different categories of birds.
Okay, so let's take the seabirds like guillemots, murres, puffins. Their breeding season is they roughly right back on the coast or start to do nesting in April. Doesn't really get rolling until May, but first puffins are early April. Occasionally we see cormorants carrying material in March, but so April to it peters out in September. That's when you would be done looking at the seabirds in terms of breeding. Marble murrelets, you see them year round potentially, things like that. Shorebirds, we have fall migration. Actually, fall migration begins in late June, so it's kind of hard to call it fall migration because it's barely summer, but some birds begin to move back in late June, and August is kind of the peak month when a lot of juveniles show up. So throughout the summer into fall, we have birds moving through, and then smaller numbers of shorebirds will overwinter here. Waterfowl are breeding during the summer months. Things like harlequin ducks and golden eyes and stuff will leave here in mid-April to mid-May, and then they'll be gone and come back. Some will start showing up in September. The male harlequins will come back obviously immediately after the female starts laying on the eggs or incubating eggs. And grebes are sort of the same thing. They're breeding inland during the summer and coming back sometime in the late summer to fall.
Awesome. This is a quicker question. The murres have been migrating for several weeks. Is it unusual that they're not on the rocks at Equina Head yet?
Well, if it was before 1995, I would say something is really wrong. But up until about mid-90s, bald eagles were not attacking murres at Yaquina Head. And so the murres were on the rock in April, and they were laying eggs the first week of May. Their chicks were hatching June, and I'm talking a large number of chicks. Because of the situation with bald eagles now, the murres start much later. They're often flushed off the rock, and their egg is lost, and they have to lay another egg, which is a huge energy requirement of the female. They get flushed again, and so if it was typical, they would be on the rock on eggs right now. But it's a really different scenario, and they're later and later. So it's not unusual yet that they're not there, but I suspect they'll be there by the end of this month. But again, it's an evolving situation. And when this first started, I consulted with some folks in Alaska, and they didn't believe me that eagles could have this kind of impact on murre colonies. They said, "Oh no, it's got to be water temperature and lack of food." And I said, "No, you got to come and see this. This is real, and it's not the eagle taking a murre; it's the disturbance that is caused." And so now this issue occurs all along the Oregon coast, north of Florence. Every colony has been impacted by this. So birds are moving around trying to find a safer place. And I think in the end, we're going to have a lower population of murres here.
That is fascinating. Let's see. I've seen whimbrels many months of the year at Hatfield. Not many, but not in usual migration time. Do some stay year round?
Yeah, we do get some whimbrels will stay into the summer, and I suspect those maybe are younger birds or non-breeders that don't go back. And so, yeah, I think one year in the early summer there were like, a large number out there. So you can see whimbrels through the summer, not many, and they're sometimes hard to find. But the Marine Science Center would be a good place. That seems to be kind of a melting pot for seabirds. I mean, sorry, for shorebirds.
Okay. Can you speak about the Pacific Flyway? Where did they go within the flyway, and how long is their migration?
Well, shorebirds it's a little bit different. There are actually 9 flyways for shorebirds. So traditionally it's the Pacific, Central, Mississippi, Atlantic. It's totally different with shorebirds. There are 4 flyways that encircle Alaska. And some of those birds actually go down for what we would call the Central Flyway. Some come down the Pacific. Some go way out in the Pacific, and some cross over and go all the way to New Zealand and Australia and back through China. So it's a little more complex with shorebirds. They're doing a lot of different things. And so it's kind of hard to describe, but some of our birds like Dunlin will be flying down, coming through Oregon, California into Mexico. Some of the birds, yellowlegs, some of the other, and tattlers will be going to South America. But it's not as easy, and it would take a long time to show you those flyways, but it's really pretty amazing what some of these birds do. The world record holder is a 4-month-old bar-tailed godwit that left the Yukon Delta in Alaska and flew nonstop to Tasmania in 11 days and 1 hour, 8,700 and some miles. And so that shows you the extreme that some of these birds go through.
I love learning about their migration. We have one more question in the chat. We still have some time, so if anyone has a question, feel free to throw it in there in the Q&A down at the bottom. The last question is, do eagles eat cormorant eggs as well?
Eagles will eat young cormorants. Eagles will eat a lot of different birds. They've been responsible for eliminating cormorant colonies, particularly double-crested cormorant colonies inland around Halsey Bay here. There's one near my house on Ekman Lake that they took all the young out of, and they'll take young out of cormorants and nests along the coast. And I think that's one reason why we have so many cormorants breeding under the Yaquina Bay Bridge now. I think a lot of those have decided it's safer under the bridge than to breed out there in near these big colonies. So yes, they do take young cormorants out of the nest, and they occasionally take adult birds, but it's, they can fly with the pelagic cormorant. Double crest is getting kind of heavy for them to carry.
Awesome. Yeah, let's see. Oh, we do have one more. Awesome. Do you have any field guides that you'd recommend for this part of the coast?
Well, let's see. I just use Sibley, the general Sibley guide for North American birds. There are I think there are some guides more specific to the coast, but that's what I use is Sibley, and I've also got it on my phone, so in the field I can look at it, and it's nice to have it in the field so you can compare. And most of them have it where you can hear the animal call, so you can click and hear its call. So if you're not sure what you're looking at, you know, you can do that. Also, you can download the Merlin app and you can take a photo of the bird you're looking at and send it to Merlin, and it'll try to figure out what bird it is for you. And it's getting very accurate with that now. And it actually can do voice recognition too. So that's another possibility for people to use, is that Merlin app.
I personally love the Merlin app as a new to birding person, so can recommend that as
When
well.
it first started out, I saw this bird and it wasn't very big, and it said it's a white pelican. I went, oh my God, this thing needs some improvement. But that was years ago. You know, it's computer learning and it's really good now.
All right, well, we haven't had any more questions come in. I'll just ramble for a second and let anybody throw another question in there if they have them. But like Heather said at the beginning, this has been recorded, so I'm going to send out the link to this recording to everybody who registered for the webinar within a couple of days, ideally. So just keep an eye out for that email from me. There's a lot of great information in this presentation, so might take a couple more watches to digest all of that. But yeah, thank you so much, Roy. This has been fantastic.
No problem.
And we have not gotten any more questions, so.
Let me just say one last thing. If people want to see large number of shorebirds on the coast, last week of April, first week of May. And if it's a southwest wind, you know, kind of like the rain's coming, they're going to be offshore flying and you won't even see them. But if it's non-windy or a northwest wind, go down to the beach and just stand there, and you'll be just amazed at the shorebirds and loons going by and waterfowl. It's really tremendous.
Well, we don't have any more questions. I guess we'll wrap it up then. Thanks everyone for attending. This was a really great presentation, and like Nissa said, it'll be sent out, and we will also have it posted on the website for future use. So thanks again, everyone.
Okay.
Thanks all.